someone asked me a few months ago what it means to be female in this industry, I would have been, well, what's there to say? Why wouldn't it be? It's not really much of an issue. So the opportunity has been quite welcome in affording me the platform to consider women's role in cannabis and share my experiences with you. Hi, good morning. Let me start by saying what an absolute pleasure it is to be here with so many accomplished, amazing, inspirational women. I feel honoured to have been given the chance to discuss with you women in cannabis industry and share my experiences to date. Before I go into the detail, I'm just going to admit up front that actually until being invited to speak here, I really hadn't thought about what it means to be a woman in the cannabis industry. Obviously, I am one. And actually, a few weeks ago, I announced that I'm pregnant with my second child. Thanks. Yay to procreation. But had someone, and obviously this has given me an opportunity in light of considering my work, in light of being a pregnant mum, what that actually means. But had someone asked me a few months ago what it means to be female in this industry, I would have been, well, what's there to say? Why wouldn't it be? It's not really much of an issue. So the opportunity has been quite welcome in affording me the platform to consider women's role in cannabis and share my experiences with you. Let me start by telling you a little bit about myself and my background. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for European Cannabis Holdings, ECH. ECH is an investment company focused on the ancillary companies that complement the medical cannabis industry. What does this mean in plain English? We don't grow it, we don't cultivate it. We have focused on creating the infrastructure, the tools, the ecosystem for medical cannabis to take a meaningful place in the UK and in Europe, and help patients who need it to get this vital treatment that they so clearly deserve and need. The way we do this is by supporting a portfolio of companies that all offer different access points for medical professionals, patients, educators, and investors to engage and improve the industry. I won't go into too much detail about the whole company, but our companies, and some of you might have heard of them, include Prohibition Partners, which is a market intelligence and consultancy firm for companies and public who are interested in the company. Cannabis Europa, which is a conferencing platform for industry leaders, governments, and healthcare professionals to come together. And actually, we've got European Cannabis Week in June of this year in London. The Academy of Medical Cannabis, which is an online learning platform for healthcare professionals to learn about cannabis. Neuro, which is a wellness snack bar that has just been launched in the UK, which has CBD oils in it. Astral, which is our European importation and distribution company, and the Medical Cannabis Clinics, a private chain of multidisciplinary medical clinics with leading healthcare professionals who will confidently, competently prescribe cannabis for those patients who are in need, who, as we just heard from Hannah, are really the inspiration for the whole industry in this country. As COO, my role is to essentially to operationalize all these activities and projects that we have undertaken, to put in place processes, systems, and governance to allow our businesses to grow and to flourish. This is my first startup gig, and it's a bit unlike anything I've ever done before. My background is management consultancy, and I cut my cloth in massive, established, international, traditional corporates, first Morgan Stanley and then Ernst & Young. The chaos and uncertainty that comes with running a startup is the antithesis of being part of a heavily systemized international firm like them. When I say it's a culture shock, that doesn't even touch the surface. It's a complete cultural overhaul, mainly because there is no prescribed culture, either at ECH or in the industry overall. Because I'm new in a business in a sector that's essentially younger than most of us in the room, there isn't a paradigm of this is the way we do business that we can all conform to. We, all of us here, are defining what that culture can and should be. I see this as an opportunity as much as it is a challenge. It presents a great opportunity for women and more broadly for everyone to cherry pick the best working environments and practices that we've all accrued in our individual experiences. Flexible working, equal opportunity, diversity, equal and transparent pay structures. And it presents us a chance to shun those practices that left us feeling diminished and insecure and that really just don't work for women. It's a massively empowering thing to be determining how things get done, to be making sure that with every process, operational requirement, pitch, new hire, or government structure we put in place, we are hardwiring that diversity, equality, and meritocracy into the system. However, I say if, because the more the industry develops, the more at risk it is of becoming the conforming to the corporate type. I don't think we're there yet, but there is a danger. Last month, Cannabis Business Banks published a report showing a significant drop in leaders in 2 years, from 36% of senior execs in the industry to being women to 27%. Of the firms surveyed, 38.5% of employees are women, and only 17 of them are directors or executives. Based on these stats, the cannabis industry is doing well compared to other traditional industries like construction, agriculture, FMCG, and even technology, which comes in at 20%. But we're still behind the big female-friendly industries such as education and real estate. And this gender gap has developed even despite the relative youth of our sector. Whilst we can all acknowledge that this is one written report written in the US, that in an industry that's developing in a different way than it has in the UK and Europe, it's still worth noting and something that we should be looking up to, of the warning signs. There's a strong possibility that as our areas of work become more established, as regulation and attitudes alter, and once we're no longer the new kids on the block, that we could end up mirroring those companies before us to feel, well, not so very disruptive or particularly radical. From a business perspective, that is the ideal, to be established, to be like everyone else. However, from a progressive working environment and progressive cultural point of view, we have to be more sensitive to changing tides that come as the industry matures. If we want our reputation to sustain being a friendly, inclusive, and diverse industry to work in, not just for women, but for any demographic, then we have to proactively create the strategies and structures to mitigate potential damages and corporate bias. And we have to be prepared to prioritize these issues when they don't seem business critical. I'm optimistic about the industry. My experiences at ECH compared to my previous positions are chalk and cheese, and ECH wins hands down on every juncture. But I think we're well placed to build something that recognizes, respects, and supports women. Look at the wide range of wonderful women here today: patients, mothers, scientists, business owners. There's every reason to feel positive. There's every reason to expect that as an industry, we will indeed recognize the value that you and so many others bring. There is every reason to look forward to more and more amazing women being empowered and being able to make a difference in real terms. There is every reason to believe that you are the game changers. And changing the game we are. It's been 6 months since the law changed on medical cannabis here in the UK due to mothers' battles, just like we heard from Hannah. Barely the blink of an eye, and while it's amazing that the government has finally recognised the enormous health potential of medical cannabis, the reality and practice is that nothing's really changed for those people and patients who really, really need it. Despite promising to do so, the government has not released any figures for how many cannabis-based products have actually been prescribed for medicinal use by the NHS, but we know anecdotally that it's paltry. Patients with severe pain or those suffering from neurological conditions are simply not able to access this treatment. They are finding it well near impossible to find doctors willing to prescribe in the face of medical societies and governing bodies taking a hostile view. We know that clinical commissioning groups, the CCGs, are not committing NHS funds to cannabis, and we know that the legal framework to support the NHS clinicians is sorely lacking. This simply isn't good enough. While the NHS drags its feet, and more patients are losing out on potentially life-changing treatments, and I believe they deserve better, as we all do. Which leads me to one of my main responsibilities at ECH, and something that I'm very excited about, which are the medical cannabis clinics. Ultimately, the objective is simply about improving access to cannabis for patients who are in desperate need of the treatment, and for whom existing treatments haven't yet worked. We're working with some of the country's leading clinicians across multiple medical disciplines who are being trained to competently and confidently prescribe medical cannabis. So far, we've opened one clinic in Manchester, and we're opening more and more up and down the country, literally as we speak. And our vision is to be able to provide medical cannabis to as many patients as possible for whom it can help. Yes, these are currently private clinics. And although NHS patients who are referred and funded can, of course, come to them, and we welcome them, but let me say we know this isn't the ideal. And we recognize that the fees, although in line with other private medical consultations, are not going to be possible for everybody. Our clinicians have worked in the NHS for many years, and they and we absolutely believe that this treatment should be available on the NHS to patients who need it. But unfortunately, in this country, that's not happening. And whilst the NHS, CCGs, medical community, and governing bodies sort themselves out slowly, we are offering that stepping stone to providing patients the access who are suffering from these chronic conditions. As soon as we discussed opening the clinics, I knew I wanted to get involved, and I pitched immediately to the company to lead on setting up and managing them. At the time, I didn't really think about what my motivation was. I just knew that I wanted it to be my baby. And to keep on message, it's an area where I think that probably my gender is perhaps most relevant for two main reasons. Firstly, I think that as our flagship caregiving facility, the Women's Touch, which is an awful term for me, but it's been quite helpful. Women do bring their own character traits to any organization and most lines of work. And with the clinics, I think the high level of emotional intelligence, empathy, and interpersonal communications has been very valuable. It's allowed me to create a business model and build a team that offers a patient-led service that our clinicians can really get on board with. The second element has actually been very important because recruiting and retaining the best clinicians to work for us it's been a challenge. We operate in a highly regulated national healthcare system that is still developing, and it's not been easy. Moreover, as you expect, these clinics and clinicians have also attracted a fair bit of media interest, which has also posed another issue for them. In order to make this work, I've ended up engaging with some incredible individuals, and interestingly enough, we have created a female-led team with Dr. Danny Gordon and Christina Doherty. So far, it's the only team in ECH's wider portfolio that is women-led. This isn't by design, but is a serendipitous outcome. Working with clinicians has been a very valuable learning exercise, and I have enormous respect and admiration for the services they provide, and huge appreciation and gratitude for their commitment to getting these clinics off the ground. The second reason why I think my gender has ended up being relevant is because I think that any mother or carer, but I speak as a position of a mother, has had a meaningful interface with our care services across the board, primary, secondary, and tertiary. This isn't to negate the experiences and perspectives of everyone else who has received healthcare in some way. And obviously, this isn't unique to women or applicable to all women. But certainly for me, previously having had no, thank God, serious medical interventions or treatments, it was having a child with a fairly complicated pregnancy that has influenced my attitudes and understanding of the healthcare system and how I want our clinics to be accessed and perceived by those who both deliver and use the service. This, to a large extent, has driven how I've approached building the clinic's business, prioritizing care over counting and patients over profits. Working in the medical cannabis space is the first job I have done that is more than just the job I have done or CV building. It appeals to both my business interests and my skills. And crucially, it's an industry I'm hugely passionate about. To be able to say that I'm part of this collective effort to alleviate pain for those who are suffering, to educate those who don't know the potential of this treatment is really the dream. That's not to say there aren't huge challenges and hurdles to overcome. The flip side of being in the position of designing an industry from the ground up and there being no prototype means that in a fast-paced, growing, sometimes frenetic environment, it's really difficult to keep up. We work hard with long hours in order to keep up with a fast-paced industry that's often running before it can walk. The intensity of the working environment can take its toll. And for women, especially those who are mothers or carers, looking to work flexibly and manage domestic responsibilities like nursery pickups, this is a tough challenge. In Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, she writes about how long before Barack was running for president, she would try and squeeze childcare and domestic duties into a half-hour lunch break. Recently, my male colleagues were amazed at my efficiency the other week when I managed to fit in a Selfridges shop to get my sister her 40th birthday present in a 15-minute window in between investor meetings. We all get it right. If it can't be bought either online or in a 5-minute window, then it just doesn't get bought. This is the reality, the constant work-life balance for women all across business industries. And when you work in an industry that is non-stop and fast-paced, that quest for balance can become more strained. If there's a silver bullet to address this, I haven't found it. And this is my specific experience. But I do believe that for all of us, life is a constant assessment and judgment calls on the balance that we need. I also believe, and I'm lucky enough to have found it, that it definitely helps when you love your work and you're passionate about the job you do and you work with amazing people. I grew up in a very feminist family surrounded by strong women. I have 3 ballsy, loud-mouthed older sisters who are all making massive strides in their respective areas and are all massively feminist. In some ways, this has given me a bit of a false sense of female empowerment. I take it as an entitlement and a given that I ought to that it ought to exist. This is obviously not the case, and I've seen that firsthand myself in the corporate world. Yet working for ECH in the medical cannabis industry has proven to me that it can be better for women. It can be better for employees in general, and it's up to us here in this room to make that change. As Madeleine Albright, the first female US Secretary of State, said, there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women. I've worked with and experienced those women, and I'm delighted to not be working for them anymore. But over the years, I've also been privileged to work with some amazing women who do help their peers, and I work with them today. These are the role models I want to emulate and try to. I believe we have a huge opportunity as leaders in this industry to support each other and be standard bearers for equity and equality. Put simply, I'm excited and optimistic about what the future will bring. And I hope those of you gathered here today are too, not just about women in the industry, but in the industry more generally. Thank you.